Welcome to another edition of the Food Systems Podcast, brought to you by the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. My name is Mark Titterington, and for the next 30 minutes, I shall be your host. And today we are joined by Mónica Andrés Enríquez, Executive Vice President for Europe from Yara. Very much looking forward to talking to you, Mónica. We happen to come together in the week in which the Forum has just published its first perceptions and an insights report on developing and scaling regenerative agriculture, a very timely opportunity to talk to you. Mónica, I'd like to just start by asking you one of the questions that came up consistently in the inquiry that we've conducted over the last 12 months that sits behind that report. What is regenerative agriculture? What does it mean to you and to Yara?
Hi, hello, Mark. Thank you very much for reaching out and inviting Yara to share our views about regenerative agriculture. Yes, in Yara, we see regenerative farming as one of the solutions to transform our food system and grow a nature-positive food future. That, by the way, this is our company's ambition. We work along the following definition. Regenerative agriculture must focus on the outcomes, and it is about implementing the best sustainable farming practices that positively affect nature and climate. When we talk about outcomes, we refer to have a holistic approach focusing on these 5 main areas that are greenhouse gas emissions of rising concern, as you know, biodiversity, soil, resource use, and farmers' livelihoods as well. Because we have seen from recent discussions at a European level that the concept is being more broadly and less prescriptive compared with other related concepts, such as agroecology and also organic farming. And just for instance, it includes the use of modern technology and agricultural inputs aims for a more optimized use, which we applaud because it provides more flexibility. And what we need on this, we need from input providers, but also the food chain to rally behind what regenerative agriculture is about and how we can measure its impact. I believe that this is what would make the big and the huge difference. This is what I read from just for interest. Also, they're recently published on the Forum of Future of Agriculture about the regenerative agriculture, and one of the main takeaways ways that we share as well is that I shared with us, but also with farmers and landowners, was there is a need to common metrics and for an agreement on the desired outcomes. So this is why we think that the collaboration is needed and why we need to collaborate with different players and partners, such as Sustainable Agriculture Initiative Platform, and the OP2B, that is One Planet Business for the Biodiversity, as you know, initiative. We are both collaborating with that. So I would like to use this opportunity of today, of this conversation, Mark, to invite partners to join us in this journey, because we must reach scale. Otherwise, we will not make any impact. And throughout this process, we, however, need to have one compass. Regenerative agriculture can only work for farmers when the 3 pillars of sustainability, environment, social, and also economic are equally considered. So as I said, as you see, it's quite a broad concept. We are developing, working on this. But what we like of that is that about the flexibility and that the use of the technology to measure that.
That's really helpful, Mónica. You've set that up extremely well. There's so many things that I want to get into with you about, benefits and progress that we might be making in terms of bringing the industry together around, perhaps one compass, North Star almost, as you were alluding to there. Just before we get there, you touched on this point of measurement. And it does seem to us at the Forum as well that's going to be key, in part because the definition is quite loose. And one of the things that people said to us during the inquiry is that creates the scope for greenwashing. So So it has to be about measurement. I guess you would support robust measurement of the outcomes that we're aiming at with regenerative agriculture.
Yes, absolutely, Mark. Yes, we support that the harmonization of the measure and also the definition. We need to speak the same language when we refer to regenerative agriculture, so that we build also the trust all along the value chain, the agri-food value chain, and the farmers know what to do. And then how are they going to be paid for? And also at the end consumer of food, because we are in this agri-food value chain, they also have the trust on what they are bringing to their homes. So for sure that we need this harmonization of measurements. And for that, we also count on these organisms and also these platforms that will help us to reach out this common goal.
I want to touch, as I said, on the benefits piece. That was something that we certainly looked at in the inquiry. You work with a lot of farmers, both in Europe and indeed around the world. Tell me what you think the main benefits are to farmers from regenerative agriculture. But then I'd also be interested to know why you'd be interested at Yara, and also why you think the rest of the value chain should benefit from regenerative agriculture.
Yeah. Yes, there are actually several benefits as we see on regenerative agriculture that can bring alongside. First, regenerative agriculture aims at mitigating emissions and improving crop resilience while enhancing soil fertility and preventing soil degradation. So furthermore, regenerative agriculture adopts an efficient use of all necessary resources required for crop growth without increasing the pressure and land use on biodiversity. And finally, just to name three of them, regenerative agriculture brings prosperity to farmers. One of our goals at Yara is to help the farmers increasing the profitability of their farms. Better nutrition management will increase plant health and hence the productivity. So as you see, we are very much interested on that. And you know that we are producers of fertilizers who we are engaged and committed to improve the crop nutrition here in Europe. And for that, the main interface is soil. So with the regenerative agriculture, if we can improve the soil health, and we are convinced of that, that will improve also all the features from the soil to make the plants the uptake of nutrients by plants easier as well and more efficient. That will reduce also the losing and the leakage of nutrients as well.
So that's the kind of the agronomic benefits, I suppose. Just and also for the benefit of our listeners, why is Yara so interested in this? I mean, you could have business as usual, but you have decided that this is something that you want to go after, as have others in the downstream value chain. Just tell us a little bit more about your motivations.
Yeah. Business as usual in Yara is being farmer-centric, so responding the farmer's needs. This is a first question, and that has been the traditional business of Yara. The ambition of Yara is growing a nature-positive food future. That this now involves the whole value chain until the production of food, and we are committed for climate neutrality as well. So with regenerative agriculture, it's a means where we can achieve both. So respond to farmers' needs, because they will need a lot of attention and also advice on how to apply regenerative agriculture practices, but also the use of the new generation of fertilizers, the green fertilizers that will be between 80 to 90 reduced carbon footprint. With that, we can decarbonize the food chain. So these green fertilizers become, and we are about to produce in the coming weeks now, green fertilizers become the game changer of the whole evaluation. So as you see, we are very much committed and engaged to these regenerative agriculture practices and the adoption by farmers, and also the understanding by the whole value chain.
I'm struck myself, Monica, that the more I kind of look at regenerative agriculture, and I think in some ways it's another way of describing the system change that we need. There's no one actor in the whole chain that can deliver this on their own. What progress do you think that we're making towards developing and scaling regenerative agriculture, both in terms of the farmers, the numbers of farmers that are adopting it, but also the level of collaboration between companies like yours, NGOs, policymakers, to really deliver what is a systematic change?
Yeah, you struggle because, and you are not the only one struggling with this. The main three challenges, to name three, that I see is the lack of short-term attractiveness for farmers. This is first. Then also the risks related to the transformation, that farmers are most of the time being alone. And that is very unfair. And then the last is the cost of the transition. So we need to address these challenges together as main players across the food value chain. The key is to make it attractive for farmers first, but for that we need flexibility in the approach. By that I mean that we need to leave sufficient freedom to farmers to choose solutions that work best for their own context. And for that, they need to have elements to decide on what is best for them. And the commitment and collaboration that you were related to, it's needed for all actors, and this is crucial. It's the only way to create an environment that rewards and incentivizes farmers. We must support farmers in this transition, and it's not only about the private sector in isolation of the private company. Obviously, we must engage also with farmers and stakeholders who really believe in the contribution for this regenerative agriculture. There are cooperations with cooperatives. We have with Landmannen for instance, and also we need the collaboration from the European Commission for the Sustainable Food System Framework. So considering proposing should further incentivize this kind of partnerships along the value chain. So we have one element and one tool in Europe, that is carbon agriculture policy, that in our view should focus more on sustainable farming practices. But this is not the only way. It's also by promoting the use of biostimulants. And a good example from that is Greece. It comes from Greece, where they have promoting this use of biostimulants in order to increase the biodiversity. That's one of the elements of the outcomes that we pursue in regenerative agriculture throughout eco schemes. But why not to also to support the uptake of these regenerative agriculture harvests by the public sector as well? So don't leave it just to the private ones. Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, we had Robert Bonney with us, the Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation, last week in Brussels, and he was saying he talked about two approaches that he'd been involved with personally. One from the Obama administration, and then now, obviously with the Biden administration. He said with the Obama administration, we were perhaps too prescriptive, and we didn't take the community with us. What he's tried to do, I think I'm interpreting him correctly, in the Biden administration and USDA, is to look at how do they make it more voluntary? How do they enable the grower to be empowered to make the decision? And I think he was saying that's unlocked the voluntary participation of growers because they've got that freedom. From what you're saying, I guess you would agree with him, Monica.
Yeah, the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act included around $20 billion in funding for climate measures in agriculture. So that is a nice example that we would like to have something similar in Europe. So that because that will focus in Europe, in US they will focus more on expanding this regenerative agriculture. Here in Europe we could aim for that, and also from green public procurement as well. That also would be a nice opportunity. So products produced with regenerative agriculture with the reduced carbon footprint will be procured by public institutions as well. That will promote, because we are talking about a huge transformation of the agriculture system. So we need all the actors, all players in this value chain, the agri-food production, being rowing together. It's like rowing in the same direction on this.
And that's a great point about the green procurement. Again, I happened to be at something in New York Climate Week a couple of weeks ago, where the lady responsible for procurement policy within the White House was also saying that that's a huge demand pull, actually, that a lever that could be pulled that would create additional demand for these kind of products coming out of agriculture. And what I liked about that and what you've just said is that it's creating all the options, all the levers we can pull to enable this to happen, because, as you say, it is a fundamental systemic change is what we're talking about here.
Yes, every market incentive is needed, and it should be a must-have. This is what we need to reach in implementation breakthrough and accelerate the transformation. If I have a call to action, is that because we need to go faster, and we cannot lose the momentum. So, and there's no way that we can do it alone.
So I just want to go back to something that you touched on earlier, which I think is close to a lot of our hearts within the forum, is that is the hurdles that the grower has to overcome very, very practically. Again, in the inquiry that we've just run, we've talked to probably 50 or 60 growers in some detail on both sides of the Atlantic. You know, they told us that everything ranges from access to education, information, advice, to how do they manage a yield drag, to how do they just get funding for different machinery or even cover crops that they might need to do this. From your perspective, Monica, the farmers that you talk to, what are they telling you about the biggest obstacles to jumping into regenerative agriculture?
First, first is competence. So they need to know what they can do or what they are going to be measured for, and also incentivized. So, and then when that is known, it's about how to apply these new practices. And of course, they will need probably new machinery to do that. So where are they getting the funding from? And the funding from can be throughout the value chain, but in my view, should need also the public incentives on this, as we were talking on that. Farmers need clarity. We should not forget that they are the first impacted by climate change. So they are the most interested on making this happen. So, and helping to mitigate this climate warming. So the global warming. In some way, I read recently global boiling. I think it was in your report.
Global boiling, exactly.
Yeah, I read it in your report as well. So this is very scary. Just only this week we saw the heaviest storms happened in Greece already. So farmers need that. They need a clear guidance. They need agronomical advice, and they need investment. We have also an advantage, also an opportunity that comes from digital, Mark, as well. So we can, and the farmers can benefit about the digital tools that are being developed in order to be able for them to take the right decisions, because it's amazing the number of data they have to manage all along the year in order to take the best decisions. And for that, we're working in Yara with that as well. So in order to help them to decide what is the best amount of fertilizer to be applied, depending on the different situations and how the plot states are, and the expected yield as well. And farmers need, as always, they aim to improve their yields. So they are not asking for nothing that is for anything that is granted. Mm-hmm. They want to work, they want to increase their yield, and they want to be paid for that.
It strikes me. I mean, you put it so simply and yet so powerfully at the end there. These are the things that matter to the grower, and yet somehow we've not always addressed that perhaps in the right way from the grower perspective. And so I really appreciate you putting that on the table. I also thought your point about data is a powerful one, and I'd just like to share this with you and get your reaction. As a follow-up to the paper, we ran a workshop a couple of weeks ago on how you finance the transition. And I should say it's not just about financing the transition in terms of making it, but it's also sustaining that transition. And one of the things that we were looking at is there are all the financial institutions here, that the banks and the insurance companies and so forth. And one of the big blockers on their side, I mean, there's a number, but one of them is just how can they be sure that the sustainability pays, that the farmer is going to improve the resilience of the farm, that the yield won't drop, and then they can price the risk. How much is all that data that growers are now capturing? How much do you think that can play into enabling financial institutions to make better decisions, perhaps on the lending or the insuring criteria?
Yes. Managing the risk is, I think, it's the daily activity of every farmer. So, and then and they need finance and the funding and also the insurance. Insurance are also in the last year. I don't have the numbers because I'm not in the sector, but since all the floodings and the drought consequences, I think they have been also heavily impacted by that. So and they should also rely on that, improving the soil health and improving the resilience of crops, so better resistance to drought, for instance, and even flooding will help them, and then will help the sustainability in the future of the agricultural production in Europe. So I'm not an expert on this in these insurance things, but if there is more certainty that we have today, because it's about reducing the risk. So that is how I see it, reducing the risk of the impact of flooding, reducing the risk of the impact of drought by having healthier soils, by having a more biodiversity in the soils as well, so the plants can benefit of that and can be stronger to resist these uncontrollables from the climate. I think it will be of interest for those providing finance.
Well, certainly from the ones that we talk to, again, part of the inquiry and on the backside in the workshop, being able to have that data that shows that the practices that growers are adopting are delivering real value, whether that can be monetized in the form of an incentive or actually contribute to healthier soils that produce better crops. That's the kind of data that they're looking at, I think, and will enable them to make better decisions on who to lend to, how to lend, and probably more importantly, at what rate they want to lend. So I fully agree with your point there. Monica, as we kind of come to the end of our fascinating discussion today, maybe I just conclude by asking you what Yara's specific commitment is today on regenerative agriculture, and if I may, where do you hope to be in 10 years' time as we kind of turn the corner into the 2030s, which is is often seen as the dividing line between whether or not we are successful, I suppose, in the climate challenge or not.
Yes, our commitment is clear, Mark. Regenerative agriculture is the way forward to decarbonize the food system and to make farming nature positive and resilient to climate shocks. Regenerative agriculture has the potential to be one of the key farming models of the future, and climate change is more and more impactful on the farming community. So we need to shift towards a farming model that becomes more resilient, that preserves more the health of the soil and its ecosystem as well. So what Yara wants is to play an active role in this change. Beside partnerships already concluded, we are currently in dialogue with several other stakeholders to develop more projects which aim to reducing the environmental footprint of farming while preserving biodiversity and soil health without endangering farmers' economic viability. So this is a commitment today, looking into the future and also making the supporting the agriculture in Europe to be fit for that future. How we see ourselves is being part of farmers' partners, I would say, as we have been in the past, by the way. So it's not a major change on that. So we will keep on being close to farmers in order to reduce and become climate neutral in the production of food in Europe.
Well, Monica, thank you very much indeed. I mean, a fascinating conversation on a topic that I think both of us are incredibly passionate about. I've really appreciated the insights that you shared with us. It is a systemic approach, and it needs all actors. And Yara, of course, with the leadership role that you've played within that, is incredibly valuable to what I think we're all trying to do. So, Monica, thanks so much indeed for sparing the time and joining us on the show. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
It's been a pleasure, Mark. Thank you very much for inviting me today.
You've been listening to another edition of the Food Systems Podcast, brought to you by the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. Join us again next time.